Mike Radich here, and I'm now joined on the phone by Invicta FC Atomweight, Laura Marcus. Laura, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Laura, you got a fight coming up at Invicta FC 4 on January 5th. We'll talk about the fight in just a second, but first, let's go back to the beginning. How did you get started in mixed martial arts?
Well, that's an interesting question. I grew up doing traditional martial arts like a lot of people's kids do, and then I didn't really do anything during college or for a little bit after college, and I found myself just missing having that physical outlet. So I went in search of a new martial art that I could learn, and had always wanted it to be something a little bit more realistic than some of the traditional arts are. And I just kind of stumbled on MMA and fell in love with the training first, and then kind of got talked into having my first fight, and then fell in love with that too. So.
How much did you know about MMA before you started training?
I followed the sport. I mean, certainly not to the extent that I do now, but I was, it wasn't completely alien to me. I watched it on TV and had always been a fan of what people refer to in general public as UFC fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Sure. Now, I don't mean to dig in too much to your personal life, but during the time that you had started training, you were going through a divorce, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And was that kind of what pushed you towards MMA to, allow yourself to let out some anger that you might have had built up?
Yeah, I would say so. I got married really young and was only married for about 6 months, and it was just a terrible situation all the way around. And I felt, like a failure on many levels, and had a lot of anger, and more than anything, it was something that weighed on me all the time from the moment I woke up,
mm-hmm.
To, when I went to bed at night. And I found that the only time when it wasn't foremost in my thoughts was when I was working out. So I started going to the gym a lot more, and that was really when I really started digging into my training. So certainly, that whole process, just having that personal stress in my life, definitely drove me to spend more and more time in the gym because it was kind of an escape.
Mm-hmm. You said that you had no plans of ever stepping in the cage and fighting, but when did that all kind of come into your head that maybe, I do want to try to compete in it?
Well, I trained in Kansas City at just sort of with a few friends, the guys who introduced me to it, and then one of the businesses that I was starting took off, and I needed to move to New York. So I was living in New York City for about a year and a half, and found a good gym to train at up there. And it wasn't until I moved back to Kansas City after that year and a half in New York City that I landed at the gym I'm currently at, which is Grindhouse. Mm-hmm. And it's a gym full of fighters. I mean, it's not just people training for the sake of training. So honestly, it was my coaches. I mean, they really, really encourage everyone to fight. Certainly, they're not going to push anybody to do it who's not,
mm-hmm.
wanting to. But, if they kind of see that spark or that curiosity in you, and they've got plenty of connections both locally and nationally, they can find you a fight. So it was really more just a personal challenge of, wow, can I really do this? It seemed scary. A lot of the guys I train with obviously grew up, getting in scraps at school or getting in a fist fight in college or whatever, and I had never been in a situation like that. So
mm-hmm.
I didn't even know what to think about how I would react being in that situation. And I think the fact of just having that big question mark out there, like, how would I handle it? How would I do? Would I fold? Would I rise to the occasion? I just thought, I've got to answer that question at least once.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that first experience, it kind of became addicting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you started training, what was the hardest thing to learn for you?
I would say some of the more traditional Muay Thai was a little, just because I had grown up and had a lot of muscle memory from being a kid from karate. So, my kicks were a little bit too snappy and didn't necessarily twist my body into my punches. So just learning more effective boxing and more effective striking. I had good fundamentals, but really learning how to put some power behind all that was, took a little bit of undoing of some of my traditional habits to kind of clean that up. So that was probably the toughest part. The grappling, I loved from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. And how long had you been training before your first amateur fight?
There were periods where I wasn't training. I would say in total I trained about 2 years before my first fight.
Mm-hmm. What's the worst injury you've had since you started doing mixed martial arts?
All of my injuries, or I should say all of my major injuries, have come during training. I've gotten some black eyes and bruises and such in fights, but nothing major. I broke my hand in practice. I broke my foot in practice. I've had my nose not broken, but bloodied up a few times, things like that. Nothing terrible, but the broken hand was probably the most painful, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. You touched on it a little bit about your team, Grindhouse. You're there training with guys like D. James Krause, Brian Davidson, Tim Elliott, Rob Kimmons, Jessica Philippus. She's also out there training with you. What's it like, training with those, solid fighters day in and day out?
It's a fantastic opportunity. I mean, Jessica was living in Marshall, and she would come in as often as she could to Grindhouse to train. But unfortunately, most of her experience, most of her time, especially having a family, was spent in Marshall. Now that she's up in Nebraska, now she's had to find a new home. But the rest of those guys, James in particular, Tim Elliott and Brian Davidson are mainstays at the gym. I know Rob has a couple other gyms he trains at as well. But those three guys in particular, those are my main coaches, and I spend hours with them every single day. I went out to Vegas with them for Tim's fight, and got some training in while we were out there, as well as watching him put on that awesome performance, which we're so proud about. So it's just having that level of fighter around you all the time, instructing you, whether they're leading the class or they're just there as a teammate. It's encouraging, and it certainly helps everyone rise to a much higher level than otherwise we'd be able to.
Mm-hmm. It's got to be great being there right now, because Tim Elliott, he just got a nice win in the UFC. James Krause is on a nice little win streak. Brian Davidson's on a nice win streak. What's it like being in the gym these days with all this success around you?
It's certainly a name to be proud of. Locally, I'd like to think that, we have a fantastic reputation, and when it's sort of like, oh man, she's from Grindhouse or he's from Grindhouse, there's a certain level of respect that comes with that. I don't know that we're on the national stage quite yet, along with Extreme Couture or some of those better known gyms, but I honestly think that we're on the cusp of that with having Tim doing so well in the UFC. And I have, the performance that he put on after being illegally kneed and basically out of it for 2 minutes straight, to come back and put on the type of performance he did. I mean, watching him, I can't wait to watch him fight, without having had that happen to him, I guess is what I'm trying to say. He's faster than he looked. He's quicker than he looked. That's half of Tim Elliott, and he still got fight of the night. So I can't wait to watch him fight again. And yeah, certainly the reputation of the gym continues to grow as some of our fighters reach higher and higher echelons of MMA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely that Tim Elliott fight, a brilliant performance on his part. Laura, have you traveled to any other gyms to train? I know you mentioned when you were in New York you had a different gym, but since you've been back, have you gone elsewhere to get some different training?
Yeah, I have. I've trained at Extreme Couture, particularly with one of their coaches, Dennis Davis, is a good friend of mine. I've trained with him some. Just trained with him this last weekend while we were out in Vegas, in fact. I lived in Huntington Beach for about 5 months, 2 years ago, I guess, and trained out there at HBUTC, which is where Razor Rob is an instructor, and I know Rampage kind of wanders in there sometimes, and that was a great experience. They definitely have some really great wrestling instructors at that gym as well. So, I feel like I've gotten a good exposure, not just to what goes on in Kansas City, but what goes on both on the East Coast and the West Coast. Certainly, I love making it a point to try to find a gym. If I'm traveling somewhere and I have enough time and it can fit in my schedule, I try to find an MMA gym and just call them up and say, hey, can I come by and maybe train with you guys a little bit? Because if nothing else, it's good exposure. But usually, you'll pick up at least a thing or two that maybe is a different focus than what your instructor is focused on.
Mm-hmm. Are there any fighters or any gyms out there that you're very interested to go out there and train with?
I would love to train with Jessica Panay, and we've Twittered about it or tweeted back and forth to each other a little bit about doing that. Although I haven't called her up to set up any dates yet, just because this fight came up pretty quick for me. I didn't have time to do that, but I would absolutely love to go train with her. Obviously, she's the top of the class, and so who better to get to spend some time with than someone who is in the position that I would strive to be in one day. And she just seems like an awesome woman, so I'd like to just hang out with her if nothing else. But I've also spent some time training with Nicolai Kalanick down in Oklahoma, and she comes up to Grindhouse sometimes too. So I do get some work with some professional 105ers when I can, particularly with her.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite part of the sport, and what's your least favorite part about the sport?
Man, that's a good question. My favorite part about the whole sport, I think my favorite part about the whole sport is the feeling of accomplishment that you have when you win. It's not just about I beat this individual person. It's sort of, for me at least, it's not. I every time I step in the cage, yes, I'm facing this particular opponent, this sounds very, it sounds a little bit cheesy, but I really do feel like I'm fighting myself and my fears and my doubts, and more than anything, just the act of getting in there and putting all on the line and putting everything out there and then coming away from it. That feeling of both relief and excitement is probably the most addicting part of the sport. I love the camaraderie of the daily grind at the gym. You get to sort of, it's an interesting relationship that you form with your teammates and your coaches, different than the type of friendship that you have in other places, I think, and I love that part of it too. The part that I hate the most, I am finding that I am probably in a very, very small minority in that my husband does not do MMA of any sort. He doesn't do jiu-jitsu or any combat sports. It's not that he's not athletic, he is athletic, but his time is completely wrapped up in his businesses. So every other woman that I know of either has a husband that's a personal trainer, or he does jiu-jitsu, or he also fights, or he did fight, or something like that. And having your spouse not be completely ingrained in the sport like you are can be difficult at times. I mean, he's certainly really, really supportive of me doing this, but I don't ever feel like I want to take away from the normalcy of his life. So, for instance, tonight, I'll make him a full meal where I'll just have a little bit of lettuce and some chicken, basically. So that part's kind of hard. But when I'm dieting and I'm spending more and more time at the gym as the fight gets closer, I know it's hard on him. So, I hate that is taking away from my time with him. That's probably the hardest part.
But in a way, could that possibly be a good thing that you have two separate lives? Basically, you have your gym, and then it doesn't really cross over because Zoya Gurgel and George Gurgel, they see each other nonstop. They don't really have the separation. Is that possibly a good thing that you're able to separate things up?
Yeah, I'm sure there are some good things about it. I know sometimes when couples train together, it can get really stressful because one starts getting on the other, but you're not doing this, or you're not working out hard enough. I'm sure it's great to have them there for encouragement too, but I know that can be stressful because I've seen that happen, with couples at our gym even. So yeah, I'm sure there are some advantages, but I feel there's a little twinge of guilt every time I leave in the evening to go to the gym yet again, for the third time today, and I'm sure that there's maybe a little part of him that thinks, oh my gosh, is 3 times really necessary? Where every part of me is saying, no, I have to be there as much as I possibly can be right now. But like I said, he really is, at the end of the day, he really is very, very supportive of me and has been very patient with my I get a little crabby, when I'm cutting down on the carbs. I can get a little emotional, so he's prepared for that this time.
Right. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
You mentioned that since you've been doing this, you followed it a little before you were doing it. Now that you've been doing this for a long time, that you've become, a really big fan of the sport. But how big of a fan are you? Are you, buying a UFC pay-per-view? Are you watching Strikeforce on Showtime? Are you watching Bellator? Are you watching all these different shows that are on?
Yes, yeah. I certainly don't miss a UFC card. And we'll make a point to find a bar that's showing them, even if we're out of town. And like I said, my husband is a huge fan of the sport. He just doesn't do it. So,
sure.
I love watching them MMA together. Yeah, I catch as many cards as I possibly can. Whether I catch every single Bellator and every single Strikeforce card, maybe not every single one, but close to it, to the point almost where people will say, "Oh, remember that fight when so-and-so fought so-and-so?" And oh my gosh, I watched so many that it becomes jumble in my head, and I can't remember people's names.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a lot out there. Who are some of your favorite fighters to watch?
Oh my gosh, I'm in love with Rory McDonald right now. Love Rory McDonald right now. And I didn't necessarily, and not because he beat BJ Penn. I liked him before that. But,
sure.
And I didn't necessarily think the little bit of showboating that he did was very tasteful. I don't have a problem with it necessarily. It's not something I would probably do, but I just love his technique and how focused he seems and how calm he seems. I mean, every aspect of his game seems so on point that, I just look at him and I'm like, that is what I want to be when I grow up. In fact, I saw him out in Vegas, and I'm not a big, I don't get starstruck, and if I do get starstruck, I actually sort of go out of my way not to show that I'm starstruck. But I totally couldn't help it when I saw him, and I took a picture with him and told him that I was a big fan. So.
I see. And one thing I'm just curious about your nickname. You don't have one right now. Is there anything that any prospects for a nickname? Anything that people are calling you these days?
It's almost a joke that I don't have a nickname because there are so many nicknames floating around. I could list off probably 10, some of which are not completely PG. Seeing as how my last name is Sanko sounds an awful lot like Skanko and things of that sort. So the guys at my gym are like brothers to me. So more than anything, they're constantly giving me crap about stuff. So a lot of them are the opposite of what I would want to be called going into the ring. But I just haven't had that one name that really has stuck, and I refuse to name myself. I feel like a nickname is something that people either give you or that you earn. So I'm going to wait for it to sort of happen naturally.
Changing gears a little bit, I want to talk about some outside the cage stuff, and then we'll go back to some MMA stuff. But you have a degree in business administration and entrepreneurship from William Jewell College. But originally you were a piano performance major. Why did you decide to change?
Well, my hands, first off, my hands are really, really small. And that there are a lot of people that can have enough natural ability to accommodate that and make up for it. But I just could not. I loved big pieces like Rachmaninoff and things like that. And Rachmaninoff, you literally need physically big, strong hands to play it properly. So I was finding myself struggling with that, and I think that my love of music was more on the expressive side. I just really enjoyed having a place where I could express myself, and I used to write my own music and things like that. And then when I went to college, and it became, no, you're going to learn this specific piece this week, and you need to spend at least 4 hours a day, in the music hall practicing, and it became a little bit too clinical for me. It took the fun out of it. So, and quite honestly, I wanted to be able to make money. I know that if being a musician is you're really, really, really limited in what you go on to do in your quote-unquote real life. So I just sort of had a come-to moment with myself and decided that I wanted to have a career outside of music. So. Right.
And you're doing the entrepreneurship thing now, and one of your companies, I'm not sure what company that it was, but it was funded by Sean Parker, who, for the people who don't know, that was Justin Timberlake portrayed him in the movie The Social Network, and he funded one of your ventures. Was this the high-end jewelry one?
Yeah. Precisely, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and could you talk a little bit about that, because this seems very interesting, that jewelry thing that you were doing.
Man, it was a fantastic business model and business idea. I can't take credit for the idea itself, but I got paired up with that guy while it was still, sort of just an idea, and then helped him, along with a couple other people, helped him turn it into a business, build out the website, create the inventory, create the marketing materials, and take it into the marketplace, and more importantly, take it into the capital marketplace, looking for venture capital funding and angel funding. So, that whole experience was just incredible, to be honest with you. That was the business that took me to New York. So I was living in New York as soon as we got the funding from Founders Fund, which was Sean Parker's deal. So. Mm-hmm.
And now the concept is they rent jewelry, and then you send it to them, and then they send it back, like Netflix, like sending the movie.
It's a lot like Netflix in that. So you go online and you pick out, say, for instance, a diamond necklace for your upcoming wedding. You know, it was really important to you to wear really high-end jewelry. You want to go all out for this big event. So you go online and pick out, a $10,000, $15,000 necklace and $10,000 pair of earrings. We package them up beautifully, send them to you along with everything that you need to return it, just like Netflix. So ship it right to your house. You can wear it for your wedding day or for whatever special event you're looking for. And then all you do is take it off, package it back up, and everything that was provided for you, and hand it back to your UPS guy, and that's it. Very, very, very easy, hands-free way for people to have access to jewelry that they wouldn't necessarily want to invest in, since it's probably something you'll wear at most once a year, if even that.
And what would you charge? Would it be a certain percentage of however much the thing was worth?
Yeah, it was a certain percentage of however much we had tied up in it to either make it or pay for it.
Oh, I see. And now,
so our average rental was maybe $300 for 5 days, which sounds like a lot, but in the context of a wedding in particular, it's actually $300 would be roughly what a bride would spend on really, really high-end costume jewelry. So fake stuff that looks nice would also cost about $300. So if you wanted to go ahead and have the extra step of wearing, a necklace full of real diamonds, then it was priced competitively with that.
I see. And now the venture that you're doing is a company called Grassy Pants Beef.
Yes.
For the people who don't know what that is, or never heard of it before, could you explain what that is?
Sure. Well, my husband and I own about 1,500 head of cattle. We don't live on the ranch, but it's about 2 hours away, so we're down there pretty frequently. And all of our cattle are born and raised in pasture, so it's what's called grass-fed beef, which means that the cows are not sent to the feedlot before they're butchered, and they're never fed any sort of grain. They live on grass their entire life, and all they ever eat is grass, and they're not injected with any hormones or anything like that. So it's a much healthier product, and because of only eating grass, the fat that's in the meat is just like the fat that you would find in fish. So it's much higher in healthy fat and much lower in the bad fat that raises your cholesterol. So when people talk about, don't eat red meat, well, first of all things in moderation, obviously, but grass-fed beef in particular is not something that you need to be worried about, because it's the healthy fats that your body needs anyway, and it's got fantastic flavor, and obviously I'm passionate about it. So.
And where can people go to learn more about this and order some if they're interested?
Sure. GrassyPantsBeef.com is the website. It's a small family business, so the website's not super fancy, but and unfortunately, right now we are not able to ship nationally. Although it's something I'm looking into in terms of being able to ship over dried ice and things like that, just like Omaha Steak says. Right now, really kind of concentrating on feeding the Kansas City market 100% grass-fed beef. So I'm working with some local health food stores. There's a company called Door to Door Organics that we're going to be working with. Actually, need to be delivering them at the end of this week. So, and then just individual word of mouth. There's I'm trying to get ingrained in the bodybuilding community. Around here, I've got a friend, Travis Conley, who got some the other day and just raved about it. So I'm hoping that, as time goes on, word will spread and it will be a little bit sort of a market viral effect. But this is, my previous venture was a true startup in that it was the type of company that would attract venture capital and potentially could have been a national brand worth, quite a bit of money. This will probably always be, Kansas City or regional based, but fun nonetheless. And, I enjoy the product, so it's fun to do.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other companies that you're involved with now, or are you solely focused on Grassy Pants?
I'm solely focused on Grassy Pants, although I'm always kind of, I've got a very good friend named Diana Kander, who's extremely influential in the entrepreneurial circles in Kansas City, and she and I are always talking about businesses she sees, and we're bouncing ideas off of each other. And then my husband is also an entrepreneur, and he's got 3 or 4 different companies that he owns, and is constantly, jumping from one to the other to keep them all going. And it's just a very entrepreneurial household. A lot of our friends are in those circles, so I feel like I'm always at least involved sort of in the periphery of a lot of really exciting things. And there's some things coming out of Kansas City that I think people, would be surprised to learn about. Obviously, when you think of entrepreneurship, you probably think of the San Francisco area because that's where all the venture capital is, and obviously there's tons of innovation coming out of that area. But we've had some good successes in the Midwest, too. So people don't know that Pinterest was developed in Des Moines.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. So. You've got all these different things you're doing now. You've got the fighting, you've got your company, you've got a husband. How do you manage your time?
That is a constant, I don't want to say struggle, but maybe struggle is the right word. It's a challenge. Right now I feel like I'm maybe not even the best dog parent, and I don't even have kids. I don't know how people with kids, fighters, I should say, with kids in particular, are able to manage it. I feel like when I take that time for myself during my camp, and you'll hear people say, be selfish, and you do. You have to be a little bit selfish. It sucks because I feel like other people in my life suffer a little bit because of it, but I do my best to, when I'm not in the gym, focus on whatever I'm doing at that time. So if I'm, as simple as if I'm cooking a dinner at that time, think about cooking dinner and do your best job cooking dinner, and then move on to the next thing and do that to the best of your ability, and try not to get overwhelmed by the thought of doing every single thing at once is probably the key to it, I guess. But my dog's looking at me right now thinking, why are we not at the park? We haven't been to the park in weeks.
Right. Now back to MMA. Let's talk a little bit about your amateur career. You were 4-1 as an amateur. You suffered a loss to Leslie Lockwood. Yep, 1 loss. And what did you learn from that fight?
Oh, I learned a lot from that fight, and I'm really glad that it happened. I wasn't at the time, and obviously it'd be awesome to say I wasn't defeated, but I think having that 1 loss, I don't know, it taught me a lot about myself, and there were a number of factors going into that fight that I think caused me the wheels to come off, so to speak. And for me, it was more of a mental thing. Not to take anything away from Leslie, but I know on 99 times out of 100, I would have beaten her. And there were a lot of things going on for me outside of MMA, mentally, emotionally, right when the fight happened that took away from my confidence and my desire to even be there, to be in the fight. And it was just something where I failed in being able to shut that off and focus on what I was doing at that time. So, like I said, not to take anything away from her or anything like that, but it was a failure, a mental failure on my part more than anything. In September of 2011, you had a fight for Titan Fighting Championships. That was a crazy experience even before the fight had even begun. At the weigh-ins, I believe, you had an opponent that was pregnant and wasn't allowed to fight, and they didn't know it until the day before the fight. Talk a little bit about that whole situation, going from having this fight, your opponent going out one day before, can't fight, and then the downtime that you didn't have when you thought, hey, I'm not fighting anymore, to, hey, I got to fight now. Now I got to get mentally prepared to go back in and fight. Could you talk a bit about that situation? You just nailed it on the head. You described it perfectly because, that week of the fight is it's a mental drain, and you're constantly trying to keep yourself focused and trying to keep yourself positive. And I felt great. I was really prepared for this girl, and then I couldn't figure out why she wasn't showing up to weigh-ins. And I like to get there early. I got there early, weighed in, and everything. And actually, no, that's not how it happened. I was driving to weigh-ins, and my manager called me, and he said, "Well, go ahead and stop by a buffet on your way here because your opponent just called and told me that she's pregnant." Mm-hmm. And I just thought, what? How on earth? And why? Why is she finding out right now?
Right.
And
right.
It was a little suspicious, to be honest with you, because she didn't. It's not like she took a test as part of her medicals that day and then found out right then and had no idea. I think that she must have had some knowledge of it at least a few days prior and didn't say anything, which that kind of frustrated me, obviously, because the less warning you have, the less time you have to find someone else. But anyway, so I weighed in, and I thought, well, there's just no way. It's hard enough for me to find an opponent with months' notice, let alone 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And God bless Joe Wooster. He found my manager. He found someone, and and thankfully, props to her for stepping in on 24 hours notice. That takes a lot of guts, and Kyla was great for doing that. So she showed up, and she weighed in, and I put a little bit of weight back on, and so we were within the right range, and she was a gamer, and it worked out great. But yeah, it was a total roller coaster, because that night when I went home after the weigh-ins, I didn't think I was fighting, so I was just relaxing. I was eating whatever. I wasn't getting my game face on, so to speak. And then late that night, like 11 o'clock the night before, Joe called me and said, "Okay, well, I found someone for you." And then I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, all right, let's get this show on the road, then get back in the saddle and get back to thinking what tomorrow's going to hold." So it was crazy. Mm-hmm.
And in the fight, you submitted Kyla Potter by armbar in the first round, and there was a little bit of a controversy there. Did she tap? Did she not tap? What was it? You were in there. Did she tap?
Yeah, she did tap. I think she sort of tapped and then regretted tapping. Mm-hmm. Or I heard her say to Chuck Wolf afterwards, "Well, I only tapped once." I don't know if she thought that if you only make one hand motion that doesn't count, or I don't know. There was a little bit of confusion there, but it was. I would be willing to admit if the armbar wasn't in. It was very much in, and in fact, I felt. I don't know if you do jiu-jitsu, but sometimes you can feel like an initial small pop before, if you really, really, really arched back and cranked on it, there would be a dislocation. Mm-hmm. And I felt that at first initial pop, and that was when she tapped, and so I know that if she hadn't have tapped, and if I had needed to crank on it a little bit more, I probably would have injured her. So I'm glad that they stopped it when it did. It was frustrating that it was confusing, and that she claimed that she didn't tap. But I understand that. As soon as you do, if you feel like there was even an instant where you could have gotten out of it, you regret doing it. But I would have finished it sooner after. So. Mm-hmm.
And then after that fight, she was disappointed. She took the fight on very short notice. She thought that wasn't her best performance, so she begged for a rematch, and she actually got the rematch with you. And as this whirlwind just continues for you, she showed up, but then before fight time decided to back out. She had weighed in, done the whole thing, showed up to the venue the night of the fight, and then disappeared. What happened that night?
I've never gotten a completely straight answer out of that, but you're exactly right. So everything was copacetic. It was totally normal. I was warming up. My hands were wrapped and everything. A couple fights had already taken place, but I hadn't seen her. But then in this particular venue, the different corners are completely on different sides of the building. So I didn't think it was that weird necessarily that I hadn't seen her. And then the promoter came back and he said, "Hey, I've got bad news. Kyla left, and she said she's not coming back." I don't know. Someone told me later that she got into a fender bender in the parking lot, and that maybe there was some sort of warrant. I don't want to necessarily. I don't know that for a fact at all, but someone said that, and that to me is actually a little bit more of a realistic response than what she said, which was that she didn't have her cup.
Sure.
Which the first time I fought her, I didn't remember her having one on, and I think I probably would have felt it, particularly that arm bar. And maybe there are some girls that fight with cups, but I don't know any of them, and I don't know. It seemed like a very strange excuse to throw out there. So, but yeah, those two fights were really, things were all over the place, and I just kept thinking that I would love to have a normal camp where I have a normal amount of prepared for an opponent that actually shows up and is on weight, and the fight actually proceeds as prescribed.
When they announced that the fight was canceled, they brought you in and let you explain, what was going on. How disappointing / awkward was it for you to explain to people who had come to see you fight and then not have it happen?
Yeah, extremely. I have a lot of friends that are loyal fans, but they're not necessarily huge MMA fans in general. So,
Sure.
They come to support me and to be good friends and to hang out with me the rest of the evening. It's not something that they would have been going to otherwise, I guess is what I'm saying. So I hate letting people down, and I felt like I let people down even though it was completely, out of my control. I felt terrible, and, those tickets are not always the cheapest things, and I didn't like the idea of, people spending $50 or $100 to come see me fight and then not having it happen. It was really, really frustrating. So I did my best to at least go around and say hi to everybody. I was glad that they gave me a chance to get in the cage and kind of explain the situation. But yeah, very disappointing overall. It was really frustrating.
We mentioned these two situations you had. Did I miss any? Are there any other, wild stories that you have from any of these other fights that I missed?
The fight before, let me think about this. The fight before Kyla, I had an opponent come in quite a bit overweight, but that's not necessarily unusual.
Sure.
Either. I have yet to fight, and they have me listed in the 115-pound ranking sometimes, but the heaviest I've ever fought is 112 pounds, and that was only because my opponent couldn't make it down any lower, and I kind of had to come up to meet her. So sometimes people, and I think I'm not super short for the weight category. I'm 5'5", so I think a lot of people sometimes assume that I fight at 115, and I don't. So I have yet to fight, other than Kyla, that one time. She was she weighed in at 107, I think, and then I also weighed in at 107. And so other than Kyla, that's the only true 105-pound fight I've had. I shouldn't say that. I don't mean to say all of my opponents have missed weight, because Nadia made 106 pounds, and I didn't make her run off the last pound because that wasn't a big of a deal. But she I think naturally would be a 115-pounder. She is super tall and has super long limbs, and I think that it is really, really hard on her body to get down to 105. And if she could put on a little bit of muscle and find a home at 115, I think she would just clean up. She's a fantastic fighter and a really talented woman.
That fight you had against her is the only fight of your amateur career to go the distance. Considering that, and considering that you're about to turn pro, was that maybe a good thing for you? I'm sure you would have loved to have gone in there and armbarred her in 54 seconds like you did Kyla Potter, but considering that you're about to turn pro and these girls are getting tougher and tougher and harder to finish, was that a good thing that the fight went the distance to give you that experience?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I'm really glad. Just like having that loss, you learn things about yourself and about your fight game. I think going 3 rounds was a blessing in disguise, because I certainly learned how to stay in there and grind it out, and it was very much a back and forth fight. It ended up being a unanimous decision in my favor, but there were some points where she had me in some sticky situations and vice versa. So it was nice to have that experience of a true back and forth battle of a fight, and sticking in there for the entire 3 rounds, and knowing that my conditioning and my cardio was on point. So
Now to the fight on January 5th, Invicta FC 4. Talk about the opportunity that Invicta's given to you, fighting basically in your backyard. Just talk about the opportunity you're about to get.
Oh, it's a huge opportunity. I hesitate to use this analogy, but Invicta is the UFC for women. I mean, it's the top of the food chain. It's the most highly respected women's professional organization. So this is very much a goal. I mean, it's just absolutely huge opportunity, and the fact that they are located in my backyard is crazy. You know, you wouldn't think that such an iconic MMA organization would be in Kansas City, because I don't think people outside of Kansas City necessarily think of this area as an MMA hub. So to have it here is just extremely fortuitous and awesome, and certainly allows me to relax a little bit in terms of just the logistics of cutting weight and where I'm going to sleep the night before. I can sort of go through the same routine. But there's some added pressure because I'm going to have hopefully about 100 people there, and friends and family and all that. So it's good and bad, but I would say probably mostly good. It's just it's a fantastic opportunity, and I'm really, really excited about it.
Mm-hmm. Is this a multiple fight deal with Invicta?
Yes, I've signed a contract with them.
Mm-hmm. You're going to be fighting Cassie Robb. What are your thoughts about her as an opponent?
I don't know tons about Cassie. It's harder, to analyze opponents coming out of the amateur ranks. There's limited, video that I've been able to see, but at the end of the day, I have the utmost respect for any person, in particular any woman who steps inside the cage, and I never, ever underestimate any opponent. That being said, I absolutely think I have what it takes to come away with the win, and this is going to sound, I don't know, maybe kind of silly, and sometimes I wish I could be a little bit more like Ronda Rousey and just be completely comfortable talking crap and, throwing down challenges and all of it, but that's just not... It's not my natural personality, so I'm not going to fake it. And my natural personality is I'm excited to meet her and to have this experience with her. And it's as big of an opportunity as for her as it is for me. So part of me is super happy for her. And she's absolutely gorgeous, and I'm sure she's been working just as hard as I have. And I really look forward to putting on a really, really good show with her. I'm sure that. I don't think it's going to be a quick fight. I think we'll probably at least go into the second round. So.
Mm-hmm. Both of you are kind of known for your ground game, and usually when two grapplers get in the cage, they both cancel themselves out, and it turns into a striking battle. Is that where you see the fight going, or do you see it being on the ground?
I don't necessarily. I'm not big on trying to anticipate everything that's going to happen, because generally when I have them out in the past, the complete opposite has happened. So, I'll game plan little situations within the general fight, but I don't necessarily predict one way or the other. I agree with you that sometimes that does happen, and if that happens, I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I've been working my stand-up quite a bit over the last year, and it would be kind of fun to be able to show that side of my game, because it's certainly not what I'm known for. On the other hand, if it goes to the ground, then that's awesome. That's where I'm comfortable. So.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, being in your hometown, people wanting to see you fight. Has the ticket madness, is it just heating up now, or has it already been, crazy for you?
Well, I think Invicta's had a little bit of issue working with the Ticketmaster printer, so I haven't had any tickets in hand yet. So
I see.
The madness has not yet ensued, and I'm trying to game plan a way to make it not quite so crazy in terms of meeting people to drop off tickets with them and collect money. And I might have to recruit someone to help me, because it can be really distracting to do that. But I'm sure it's going to happen here pretty quickly, especially after Christmas. Once people get past the holidays, I'm sure they're going to be ready to move on with other things. So yeah, it's going to get a little bit nuts, but that's part of the fun, is having people there cheering for you. So it's a necessary evil, so to speak. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Christmas, a perfect segue. Christmas just around the corner. What are you hoping that Santa brings you this year?
I hope that Santa brings me a win on Adventure 4.
Great answer.
I don't know if that's in his domain.
Great answer.
That's something he can wrap up for me, but that would be top of my wish list.
And finally, last question. What are your goals in mixed martial arts?
My goal is to make it, to the top. I would love to have that Invicta 105-pound belt. I think that's probably, a little ways off, although obviously getting this contract is the biggest step in that process. So I just want to be really smart about how I manage my fight career between here and then, and be smart about when I take fights to make sure that it jives with my schedule and I can really truly focus on training, because it can be difficult for me. If I know that a fight is going to take place during a busy work season for me, it might be something that I have to, as much as I wouldn't want to, delay, but I might have to just because it's not good for me to try to be doing two things well at once. It's just hard to do that. So I just want to be smart about how I go about it and make it all the way to the top to where I'm wearing that Invicta belt.
Mm-hmm. Laura, real quick before I let you go, do you have any sponsors you would like to thank, and is there anything you'd like to say to the fans?
Yeah, absolutely. My main sponsor is Century 21 All Pro. They're a real estate group here in town that does an absolutely phenomenal job. I know a lot of times people are like, oh, real estate, that's not very exciting. But you know what? As soon as you actually attempt to buy or sell a house without an agent, you start to understand why they exist and why they're so valuable. And I know people kind of hem and haw about, I don't want to pay them, but trust me, they can negotiate for you in ways that will more than pay for whatever their fee is. And these guys in particular do an absolutely phenomenal job. And they even have this app out. If you just dial 8778 or text, 8778, text C21 to 8778, and you'll download an app, and you'll have thousands and thousands of listings at your fingertips, so you can actually be looking for houses while you're getting your nails done or getting your hair done or whatever the case may be. So Century 21 All Pro is a fantastic sponsor of mine. No Limit Wheels, they make aftermarket ATV and UTV wheels as well as golf cart wheels. They can even carve your logo into the spoke of the wheel. They're just really, really, really pimp wheels for your ATV. And then I always like to throw out grassy pants, but we talked about them already. So.
Laura, thank you for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it. Good luck January 5th at Invicta 4 against Cassie Robb.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time, and have a happy holiday.